Hi, welcome back to another episode of Algebra in Words, the video series. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off the last video and continue on compound inequalities. Now in this video, I have a few problems on the board. I have 5 on the board. And what we're going to do is convert each of these and report the answers in interval notation. But along the way, we're also going to graph them and look at them as combining the inequalities, and then we'll see how they all relate. Let's start with the first one on the top left. Alright, we have -1 is less than x is less than 5. And this is a compound inequality that you can say is already sort of combined into a compound inequality form. It's made up of 2 simple inequalities. So that part we don't have to do. It's done for us already. But what we're going to do next is, let's first graph this, and then we'll show the answer in interval notation. You could go right to interval notation, but I like to have a graphical representation as well. So let's draw a number line. And we have -1 on the left. That's the lower number, so we're going to write -1 here. And let's look at the symbol. Is it inclusive or non-inclusive? It's non-inclusive. And also, it's open towards the right. So the way we want to read it is, x is greater than -1. So we're going to use a non-inclusive parenthesis open to the right to show that the values for this portion would be x is greater than -1. Even though it's written this way, that's fine. If you took the simple inequality and flipped it, it would read x is greater than -1. That's why we have -1 with a parenthesis open to the right. And now, what about this part? This is 5, so let's write 5 here. And this is also a non-inclusive symbol. And this simple inequality would read x is less than 5. So therefore, the open parenthesis is going to be open to the left, meaning going from 5 and downward. Now we can translate our graph into interval notation, which is going to look like parenthesis, -1, comma, and then the higher number, 5, and close parenthesis. And that's it. Let's look at the next one. It's kind of the same as the one above in many ways. The only difference is, in this case, these are inclusive symbols. So if we were to draw the number line, we would draw it like this. The lower value is -1/2, so let's squeeze that in there. And the higher number is 5/6, so let's squeeze that in there. And this would read x is greater than or equal to -1/2. It's an inclusive symbol, meaning it's going to be a bracket open to the right. And for the 5/6, x is less than or equal to 5/6. That's going to also be an inclusive bracket open to the left. And now you can see how you could take and translate the graph into interval notation, which would be bracket -1/2, comma, 5/6. Close bracket. Like that. So this is the graphical answer. This is the interval notation answer. And let me take this equation and move it down a little bit so it's not in the way. And so we have x is greater than or equal to 6. First, let's graph that. We're going to put 6 in the middle. And what values with respect to 6 would x be? It's greater than or equal to 6. So first of all, that tells us it's inclusive, meaning it's going to be a bracket. And since the values of x will be greater than 6, which will be to the right of 6, we're going to draw the bracket open to the right. And that's pretty much it. Now, watch how we convert this into interval notation because there's only one number here, which is fine. We're going to put the lower number value on the left with its symbol, which will be bracket 6. And since it counts for all values greater than 6, that's infinity. So we're going to put infinity as the higher limit, and we always put a parenthesis with the infinity or negative infinity depending on which side it's on. So this will be bracket 6 comma infinity parenthesis. Now let's look at the remaining two. And the remaining two now are two simple inequalities kind of broken up and connected by either and or. So we're going to report them appropriately. Let's start with this one. And what we're going to do first is in the previous ones we graphed first and then we went to interval notation. But what I want to do here is let's first combine them as a combined or a compound inequality, meaning taking the two inequality statements and just consolidating them into one. Okay, and there's a very easy way you can do that. First of all, you might start by just putting x between them like this. Okay, next you want to make sure that the lower or smaller number is on the left. So compared to -4 and +3, that would be -4. And in order to fit this into here so that the x is here, we're just going to take this and flip it. So it's going to be -4 is less than or equal to x. We just took this and flipped it and put it here. And we can just take this and put it right in because it fits right in. We don't need to rewrite the x, but we can write less than 3. And now that's how we can just write the inequality in this way. But now let's think back to what and represents. And we should think of as intersection or only the overlapping lines. So what we're going to do is let's graph each of these, and we could do it separately on separate lines. You could do that on your paper if you're following along at home. But since I have limited room, I'm just going to do them together on one graph, and then we'll see what happens. So here's my number line, and we're going to put the lower number, -4, on the left, and the higher number, 3, on the right. And now let's put their symbols. X is greater than or equal to -4. It's an inclusive symbol, so we're going to put a bracket open to the right. And then for x is less than 3, a non-inclusive portion, we're going to show that by a parenthesis open to the left because it's less than 3. So now that's our graph, and now that we have the graph, we can put that right into interval notation. It's going to look like bracket -4, comma, the higher number, 3, closed with a parenthesis. And now let's look at the last one. First, again, let's consolidate this into a compound inequality statement. So again, we're going to have x in the middle. The way that we write this is not going to matter whether it's and or at this point, but we'll be able to see how the and or difference comes out when we graph it and write interval notation. So x in the middle, and what's the lower number compared to this and this? It's -1. So the -1 is going to go on the left. And again, to make this fit into the compound inequality, we're going to just flip this. So where this was less than or equal to 1 is now going to be -1 greater than or equal to x. And now we're just going to take the x is greater than 6 and place that right here. Okay, now that's done. Now what we're going to do is graph this. So we'll draw the number line. The smaller number goes on the left, -1, and the greater number on the right, 6. Now let's use their original inequalities to graph each one. So if this is x is less than -1, less than points in this direction, so we're going to put a bracket open to the left. And for 6, which is greater, x is greater than 6, okay, this was inclusive, this is not inclusive, so we're going to draw a parenthesis open to the right. Just take a quick notice about what we're looking at on the graph. Notice how in this case, the two bracket or parentheses are sort of pointing opposite directions of each other. Okay, that's a graphical sign of or. Now, the instructions can still be either and or, but in the case of this, it's common that you see them pointing in opposite directions. And if you compare that to this one, where they kind of pointed towards each other, okay, that's usually a good indicator that that there's a place of overlap. However, notice how, since these are pointing in opposite directions, there can be no place of overlap. So anyway, now we get to how to write it in interval notation. So the way we're going to do this is sort of showing it sort of like in two pieces but combined. So first we're going to show this portion, which is going to be -infinity with a parenthesis to the left of it, comma, -1 with the closed bracket facing to the left. Okay, and now, because again, since this is asking or, remember or means not where the values overlap, but bringing together all of the possible values of either simple inequality. So we're going to take all the values from this area, this portion, and or we're now going to put into symbol as the U symbol, meaning in union with. And now we're going to write this portion, parenthesis 6, comma, and these point to the right going up to infinity, so this is going to end with infinity and closed parenthesis. That's facing open to the left. So that pretty much concludes this short video on solving, taking compound inequalities, and you can do a number of things with them. The ultimate goal is to convert them into interval notation. But if you notice, we also graphed them, and in some cases we took these simple inequalities and consolidated them into compound inequality form, which you don't have to do, but it's something that you can do, and it's another way of representing the inequality statements. So anyway, that concludes this video, and in the next video, we're going to do a few more solving of compound inequalities, as well as solving what are known as three-part inequalities. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.